You are listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. And I am your host, Aaron. Here with me is my co-host, Adam. How you doing there?
Good. I'm good.
Yes, and we're coming right back at you from part one. This is part two of our discussion of the movie Nightcrawler, 2014 film about a psychopath who breaks into the local news industry, a local news station working as a stringer. So in this part, we want to continue on what we were talking about with the movie and get into the specific topic of the creation of narratives for public consumption and creating false narratives for to produce to pander to the public for a variety of reasons. And this film, as with so many other of its themes and all the things that it does well, it does a great job of showing this and of specifically showing how local news channels do frequently just make they blow violence, societal violence, way out of proportion to they will only report on bad, terrible things that happen and nothing else. They don't cover anything else. So if you are somebody viewing local news, this is your view of the world, that it's like the scary, terrible, horrible place where only bad things happen because that's all you're seeing. So that's the narrative, generally speaking, that local news here in America gives you.
Yeah, and not just in America. I mean, if we talk about narratives, then we talk about news agencies creating these narratives, then this is something that's happening everywhere. And something we've seen more and more as time's gone on, especially in the lead up to this most recent election. It's probably safe to say that the ramping up of these sensationalistic narratives about crime and immigration and racial tensions actually had a lot to do with the way the election went. And would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And we are going to talk much about the election here in this part because. That's we've been did our election specials here recently in the episodes before this, and we're coming back to it here with the themes from this movie specifically. But before we get to the election, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the movie for a minute, Adam, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to reference the part where that critical part where Lou has Nina and he's takes her out to dinner. And he confronts her with all this knowledge of her backstory, and he confronts her by letting her know that he's been looking into what her deal is in order to extort her for a sexual relationship and also for more money in his business relationship with her. And as part of that, he goes about saying, this is a fact he found online that he's repeating to her. He says that Americans watch local news to stay informed. And he says that the truth is that crime rates are actually going down. And he knows that what the news channel is interested in is just creating this narrative of violence because, that's what Nina told him up front. Like, hey, look, we're looking for stories of crime creeping in the suburbs. And he's telling her, like, hey, look, I know this isn't true. It's actually hard to get this footage because there's so little of this crime going on. Crime rates are going down. Therefore, the work I do comes at a high price because it's hard to get this stuff. What I mean? So you need to pay top dollar, and I'm extorting you and all the rest.
Yeah, it's a rare commodity, and this is something. It's so hard to say, in terms of if we look at crime statistics and other statistics that are used to push these narratives, because everybody who's citing these these types of statistics and information is usually doing so with an agenda, and that agenda is usually involved in either over exaggerating or completely minimizing in some way. But of course, at the same time, we know that they're lying. People who are running these narratives, whatever the real story is, they are twisting, these statistics and whatever information they're getting to fit that narrative.
Yeah, I hate statistics, and if anybody they're used so often to make arguments, especially politically. And it's a crying shame because people don't realize the pitfalls of statistics and that they can be tailor-made to make a point on either side of an argument. People just view them as objective fact because they come as a numerical value. Like, oh, that's a bunch of numbers. That can't be wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do you go about collecting the data and presenting it? That's the real question behind this.
Well, this is it. And, they can be used to paint any picture you want, and this has been exposed so many times over the years where somebody comes out with some, set of stats that says, some factor is wildly escalating out of control, and then somebody else comes along and says, well, actually, no, if you take into account the all the differentiating, variables within these stats, then you actually get a different picture altogether. And in fact, the reverse is true, So, it's but as you say, the statistics because they're seen as being infallible. They're sort of tied into, as you say, they're a numerical value. It's kind of like the elevation of the scientific method. So science can't be wrong. Science is about it's a binary reality thing. It's either yes or no. It's black and white. It's 1 and 0. So statistics, by virtue, fit into that, being numbers. Therefore, if the numbers say so, then they can't be wrong. But of course, statistics are extremely complex. And a lot of different sets of data that goes into, collecting this kind of information. Again, all the variables.
So, what are you accounting for, and did you miss something? And are you have a narrow focus where you're sort of paying more attention to one factor as opposed to another, and on and on and on and on and on. Yeah, it's just that's part of the paradigm we live under, where we just kind of take things for granted and we don't think about them. We don't think about the shortcomings of these sorts of numbers that come flying at us from all angles. We just take them at face value, and I don't know. It's an unfortunate thing because it puts us at risk to really be taken advantage of by psychopathic types who just come along and they go, okay, I just have to convince you that my narrative is correct, so I'm going to do that just by pummeling you over the head with this information that suits my agenda, my cause, my story. This is my narrative, and I'm going with it. I'm going to go about convincing you of it now. Here you go. Here's a million stories about, fill in the blank, whatever it is you're trying to convince people of, whatever propaganda you're putting out there. Just find the correct stories or the correct information, the correct numbers to support that.
Yeah, and this is what's happening in this film. I mean, what they're talking about, again, we referenced the quote from Rene Russo near the beginning of the film, where she's talking about the message and the kind of the message and the purpose and the kind of mandate of this particular news agency, where they're basically saying, that we are a woman running down the street with her throat cut, and so that she's talking about how we want basically crime that involves rich white victims being victimized by minorities, so blacks, Hispanics, immigrants, whoever. It's about urban crime. What is it? Urban crime spiraling out of control,
creeping into the suburbs.
Creeping to the suburbs. And so whether or not, again, it's so hard to say as to how much of this is actually going on. But in the film, it's not about what's actually happening. It's about creating a narrative. So she is telling him to go out and seek out these events, these circumstances, so that we can build this narrative. We want you to get footage of white people, rich white people being victimized by blacks or Hispanics, or poor people.
Yeah, and then there's that the big event where he goes into the mansion and he films the people dead in there, and he gets in trouble with the cops for doing it. So they portray that first as this innocent family that got killed, and then it comes out later that they had drugs in there and it was part of like a drug related, because they're drug dealers or whatever, and they came in and the guys killed them because of that. And it wasn't and family just got killed for no reason. But then when that information comes up, it says, no, we're not going to report it because it doesn't fit So they just ignore the truth of the actual story. And one guy and there's like, no, but it's the truth. She's like, I don't care. It doesn't. I forget what the title was for this story, but it doesn't fit within the framework of that. So we're just not going to report it.
Yeah. As you say, it was a scenario involving there's some rich people involved in some kind of a drug deal, and it appeared to be like Russian mobsters. Or I think that was the archetype they were playing on there. They go and kill these people for revenge or something like that. And of course, this is all pitched across as you look at these poor innocent people and their homes being brutally gunned down, and it's like I'm just completely just ignoring the fact that these people are actually involved in high-level drug networks or what have you. So
a mansion bought and paid for by drug money.
Yeah. Exactly. A mansion bought and paid for by drug money. Yeah, that's exactly it. But I think it's one of the most interesting aspects of all of this is looking at how I guess the psychological aspect of this, because we see this not just in these kind of low-level sort of local news stations, but also internet news, and especially in the alt media and in the alt right as well, is this what amounts to panic porn is what I've come to call it. It's stuff that is meant to push your buttons, make you feel righteous and victimized, and get you thinking that everybody's out to get you, and my gosh, we just again, urban crimes creeping in. We need strength, and we need toughness, and we need somebody to sort all this out. We need more police, we need more cameras, and it's incredible how these essentially fascist type narratives and problems have been built up over the past few years.
It's so ridiculous. Everything is alarmist and extreme, and the news outlets themselves don't bother even fact checking stuff. They're at the point where they just rifle off, or they've been doing this for a long time. They just rifle off stories. They don't care if it's real true or not. And it's just all for shock value and getting attention to themselves and their cause. And they'll just report on something that fits within their narrative. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. For instance, today, the InfoWars crew was busy sending out these tweets on Twitter about how Julian Assange may be dead. And then like, oh, he's presumed missing and he may be dead. He's like this anti-establishment guy, and the establishment's got to take him out now. And then about a half an hour later, so like, oh no, never mind, he's alive. We tried to terrify you and say he's probably dead, but no, that's not true. We'll go about tweeting other stuff now. Just pretend that didn't happen.
Well, they're terrible for doing that. I mean, they're some of the worst perpetrators in terms of, again, the panic porn stuff. And truth be told, it could be a situation where the news that Assange wasn't dead actually came in before they published it. We thought, well, we'll just pretend we didn't see that and go ahead and publish it anyway, because it's a great eye-catching story. And I mean, this is it. I mean, if you go on to for me anyway, if I go onto YouTube or something and you get all these suggested videos, the recommendations pop up, and so there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, including InfoWars, and look at the titles of their videos, and they're the most inflammatory, outrageous, like the elite plan to start World War III, nuclear threat detected, insider tells of assassination attempt against Trump. It's just absolute garbage. I don't even know where they're getting this from. And a lot of it, truth be told, a lot of it is probably made up completely. And it never goes anywhere. It never gets followed up with any actual credible source information or anything like that. It's always some kind of an insider or, sources say blah, 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 and quotation marks, and it just, of course, once the headline is out there, you've gotten your little dose of adrenaline and paranoia, and nobody thinks to follow it up any further, and they just move on to the next story. And of course, this is how these local news agencies work, putting this inflammatory stuff out there. And you'd like to think that the old media would have a bit more integrity than that, but truth be told, it's even worse. So
yeah, it is. It's actually worse. All those titles are picked for search engine optimization purposes too. They just like throw every keyword they can into their titles. There's elite, conspiracy, this, that, and the other. No, just all the words that they know people are going to be searching for, they do it. And yeah, it's the most sensationalist nonsense. And oh man, their narrative is not a good one, to say the least. But it's extreme. It's a very extreme narrative, and it's not it's not the truth. It's not a good depiction of reality. However, it is true that the alt media, all these alternative news outlets are getting more and more attention. And so more and more people are taking this stuff seriously. So it's kind of like getting more and more extreme all the time, but it's getting more and more attention too, which is worrying.
Yeah, well, it's like we've talked about before. They're just playing the numbers game, as all it is. And again, this is what these mainstream free-to-air or cable news agencies, whatever they are, this is how they operate. You know, they know the demographics that are watching. They know that the people that we are targeting are going to be, rich, upper middle class, white people between the ages of 25 and 50 who are watching this before they go to work. And so, going off that, they'll know what kind of what kind of stories and what kind of headlines to run to get the attention of those people, to make them feel threatened. And this is how this stuff always works. It's to make you feel as if you need to keep watching. It's a headline that tells you that your survival may depend on this. If you don't pay attention to this and give this your full emotional energy and attention, then you may be at risk. And that's it. I mean, it's simply playing on that, and so it doesn't actually have to have any truth or fact behind it whatsoever. But
the worst part of all this is the sort of the evangelical aspect of it, where the people purveying this information are acting as though they're going to be some sort of saviors of true government, liberty, freedom, all this and that and the other, that they're fighting the evil elites that are in power. And it's never exactly explained what the real solution is, but they have, they're got the moral high ground, and if only they could get their way in there, whatever that happens to be, then things would be fine, and we could start turning things back around again.
Yeah, it's always that same principle of the ends justify the means. We will fight fire with fire. We will use the dirtiest tactics imaginable to get ourselves in there because we are right, and so we have a right to do this, and so it doesn't matter how we get there. The point is that we get there, and when we do get there, everything will be fine. It's that kind of logic they're using.
Yeah. And meanwhile, all these alt media outlets are talking about think tanks, or they should be. They used to be. I know at least they just talk about think tanks, military intelligence. Meanwhile, the think tanks are putting out all kinds of articles talking about the use of narratives and false narratives and all these things about how the public doesn't know when the world to believe. They think they believe one thing, but they know nothing. And they're constantly putting out articles about that. You don't hear the alt media people, giving a commentary on those articles, which I think would be actually pretty useful. Well, but I guess that wouldn't work for them.
No, it doesn't work for them anymore. It used to. I mean, a few years ago, you did see places like InfoWars and some of the other big platforms covering, for example, people like Cass Sunstein, where he talks about the infiltration and co-opting of conspiracy theories with this kind of nudging technique, where you would have agents infiltrate the online forums and message boards and websites and that kind of thing, and there would be, rather than directly opposing the information and the narratives, they would simply repeat the same sorts of narratives and opinions, but with a little bit of spin. That they'd just basically be planting seeds of doubt in there. And that this would be, over a long enough period of time, this would be sufficient to counter those narratives and to sort of dissolve them or undermine them in some way. But they don't talk about that kind of thing anymore because I guess they don't want their audience thinking too much about where the narrative is coming from. And they just want those clicks. So
yeah. This is a never-ending source of frustration for me these days. Is watching the alt media, and it seems to be I'll say it's degenerating. That it's getting worse than it used to be. I mean, it's been bad for a while, but it has never been as bad as it is now. Things are escalating. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just looking at the InfoWars homepage just right now, and one of the featured stories is Democrats activating terror network in U.S. So, I mean,
yeah, Democrats,
globalist-controlled Democratic Party moving against liberty. Now, okay, so what's the truth behind that? Now, the truth behind that is, and I'm not going to pretend that I've researched this thoroughly because I haven't, but what I do know is that yes, the Democrats have in fact paid protesters, and activists and things like that. So there have been these sort of leftist-funded groups moving around to Democratic rallies or sort of protesting Trump campaigns, creating a scene, getting media attention, things like that. But I mean, to then go and say that the Democratic Party as an organization is actually activating a network of terrorists,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of a leap, isn't it? But of course, they don't care about that. Obviously, they care about getting clicks and putting across a sensationalistic headline that puts the shits up everybody and keeps them tuned in.
And what it does beyond just getting more attention to themselves and, getting the viewers and all that and making their advertisements more valuable, blah, 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 all the business end of things, it creates a greater schism between the average people of not just the country, but the entire world, because it's a worldwide thing here going on online. You've got the left versus the right, definitely. Warring with one another now more than ever, and all media is complicit in just bolstering the extremist views of the left and the right, and just placating to the worst extremist ideologies on both ends, and just fueling the fire. So that people are getting more and more mad at each other, and if you're talking about like any elites being in charge, well, they don't have to worry anymore. The people are just going to be at their own throats and killing each other with pitchforks and like flaming sticks,
torches,
and things like that. Just be beating each other in the streets with baseball bats soon enough. It keeps going.
It'd be like one of those angry town mobs from The Simpsons, and they'll turn up with pitchforks and torches and stuff like that. Rah rah rah, I mean, again, this is the ultimate form of warfare, isn't it? Is to get your enemy to actually undermine themselves internally. This is psychological warfare. Who needs guns and bombs and tanks and all that kind of stuff when you can actually just undermine and confuse your enemy so much that they actually destroy themselves, which is basically
And if we're talking about narratives, I know we mentioned this, I think, via email the other day, Adam, but the big narrative for about a year now has been this one of like law and order, the authority being the police, kind of being embodied mainly in police forces. That versus the downtrodden minorities, which are getting routinely, we're seeing videos constantly, every other day on TV of someone who's a minority being either seriously injured or killed, most often killed by police officers. And so, if you're talking about a narrative that gets both sides of the issue really worked up, I'd say this is the one to follow now.
Yeah, it's the one to follow. And this goes back to the whole idea of the narrative being more important than the actual truth of the matter, because we see this back and forth online, especially between the left and the right, and especially the alt-right, when they're talking about these events like some of these so-called terror events. Now, as to whether they were really terror events, that's up for debate. But I mean, even if we just take it down to things like these Black Lives Matter protests and things like that, the truth of what's actually happening in some of these events where, say, somebody's getting killed is murky. But the tension that's created through that is being created through just this kind of how to explain it. It's just a total ignorant bias of, of the complexities of the situation.
You suit the story to your side of the argument.
Yeah, exactly. So
if you're on the right wing, you go, oh, look at these evil lefties that are creating a danger. We need to get the police out here to beat them up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much what they're saying.
That's pretty much it. And it's like, well, okay, so we have we see a Black Lives Matter protest where they are rioting, they're burning cars, they're smashing windows, that kind of thing. And the right look at that and go, well, look at them. They're doing all of this. Then, okay, Black Lives Matter as a cause is therefore irrelevant, That's the conclusion.
They have nothing relevant whatsoever to say. There's no aspects of truth within anything that they do whatsoever. They're evil terrorists, and we're not at all racist in anything we're saying against them whatsoever, not even the least, even though we are frequently.
It works in the other direction as well, because we saw this scenario with this. One of this it was basically like I think a white supremacist conference or an ethno-nationalist, as they call them, conference in the US, where this guy Richard Spencer was doing a talk, and he he did a Roman salute, and the whole of it's a Sikh Heil really, but there's about 5 people in the audience threw up a Sikh Heil, at the end of this. They were saying "Hail Trump" and this type of thing, and that of course was on the front page of all the mainstream media, and Trump had to come out and publicly disavow the alt-right, and so of course this creates the illusion that, well, this is what the alt-right is. It's a bunch of actual Nazis, which is of course not true. So it's the idea that this is what Trump's support base looks like, and so all the people on the left go, look, they're all fucking fascist pigs, kill them all, and so it works both ways.
The mainstream media is very much bolstering that, the racism thing, and anybody even remotely interested in Trump whatsoever is a racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And the Nazi thing. And so just, the most extreme thing you can come up with to get the left wing angry. They throw those stories out there.
And I have questions about some of the people, the leaders of these movements, because the other side of the story with this particular conference is this guy was saying, well, what this really was this was us trolling and being funny, and we know that it's politically incorrect, and it's not even about Nazis, it's just about this Roman salute idea, and it's it was more of a provocation and a little bit of fun, and it's like, well, okay, that may be true, but do you really think that was a good idea to do that right now? And so I have questions about these people and whether where are they leading their followers,
And within the more extreme realms, fringe elements of the alternative media, the Nazi thing is gaining real traction. So the extremist views are actually real. I guess in the left wing, the extremes are there too. People are getting really whacked out on that end too. So I mean, the insanity that both sides use to point the fingers at one another is actually gotten to the point where it is true to an extent. But again, it's a small minority of people. But the small minority of people have become so insane that they've taken this on as their identity, I guess.
Well, they set the tone. The loudest, most extreme voices will always set the tone for the majority. So, most people who are supporting Trump or in the alt-right or whatever are not neo-Nazis.
No,
that's just not true. And again, it's probably safe to say that again, on the left, most people who supported Hillary or on the left are not these radical, retarded SJWs who go around screaming, that Trump's going to haul them off because they're gay or something like that, But these people are setting the tone. They're setting the tone for everybody else, and because they're the loudest voices, they get the most attention. And because they are setting the tone and getting all this attention, that it ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the people, because they are the pundits, they are providing the narrative, then everybody who's not so extreme ends up falling into those narratives because they think, well, this is where it's going. This is where these are my people. This is my movement. These are the people I identify with. And so if they're going in this direction, then even if I don't necessarily agree with all of that, then I guess I better kind of go along with it. And that's going to happen on both sides of the divide.
And this happens as a default because of the media that we're involved with TV and all that. We were talking before that it just it demands extremes, and it demands action and excitement and the loudest, most exciting, violent things to happen in order just to keep people's attention. Yeah. And this is true in news media. And so because news media depicts all this stuff, people see it and they think it's real. But again, they're not looking at it in terms of, no, wait, no. This is a narrative somebody has crafted. Even though it's a news story, it's still a story. And that's the analogy I love to use these days. This has become my most favorite analogy for recent events, is that news stories are stories, right? Yeah. Stories, like a storybook you read to your kids, is that real? I feel like the storybook you read to your kids is actually more real than the news story you hear on CNN. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's propaganda. But the kids' story is like, old fairy tales, folk tales, things like that. There's actually elements of truth in that.
Yeah. And some wisdom. Some actual wisdom.
There's not in the news, so don't look for it there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we go back to Nightcrawler, we look at the narrative that they were looking to create, and the idea of urban crime creeping into the suburbs, or the carjacking crime wave was the other one. That was the story, the banner that they were running for a while, and things had to fit into that. And of course, it's revealed in the film that there is no real carjacking crime wave, or at least this is alluded to, and that it's simply a few examples, maybe one or two examples that they're using to completely fabricate this narrative. And this is exactly what we see happening in other media, and also in the alternative media. For example, if we look at the alt-right, then they pick a narrative like white genocide, and then they go looking. They're looking for anything that might fit into that narrative, completely excluding anything else that doesn't fit into that narrative. So, all the millions and millions of events that happen all over the world that would go against that narrative completely, get just ignored, and they focus in on these, whatever small minor story, they could find from anywhere in the world that would fit that narrative, and then that gets the headline, whites under attack everywhere. So.
Yeah, and it fits into that racial tension thing, because that is like, I mean, the whole racial tension thing is like a deep-rooted sort of instinctual thing in us. And like, one of our deepest, darkest fears is the fear of the other person who's different. Yeah. Or the other thing. It doesn't even have to be a person, just this other thing that's different. But, a person with a different color skin, or come from the other side of the world, like, you don't know anything about the person who lives in another country that you don't even know about. So it's scary. It's like, oh, that person could be out to get me. And so it's, like this primal sort of thing that can be easily exploited. No, go ahead.
It is so easily exploited, because that is, as you say, it is something that exists within all of us. I mean, if we look at the prison systems, for example, especially in the US, what happens as soon as people get put into those prisons? They segregate racially, Mm-hmm. And so when you're in an environment of tension, of fear, fear is a massive one, obviously. Fear is a huge part of it. But you've got all of this fear, this attention, this anger, this incredible feelings of loss and sadness. When you've got an environment like that, I mean, the first thing people do is to segregate into these, racially divided gangs, where you've got the Aryan Brotherhood running their gangs, and then you've got the Hispanics, various South American gangs like MS-13, and then you've got, various black gangs, and I think the only other ones really is like Nation of Islam, which is kind of the only other option. But again, it's this. It's something that can be so easily tapped into during a time of stress, and as the world becomes more stressful, as things become more confusing, and there seem to be more and more crises and confusion around us in the world. I think these racial tensions can be much more easily tapped into, so that it's much more easy to get us to identify with that sort of that very base sense of fear about, again, the other. We get into the in-group, out-group politics, and thinking in terms of teams and who's with us and who's against us. And
So as the world becomes a prison planet, We act more and more as prisoners.
Yeah.
Living in total fear, like the worst possible situation ever, and racial tensions ramped up to the extreme. People just cowering and hiding away and in shelter of the familiar, racially speaking. Like, I need to go cower and join my my white brethren or whatever race I happen to be, go with them and join forces with them. And yeah, it's ironic that this is happening by the people who are supposed to be spreading the truth and telling us about the prison planet, or that they're actually creating a prison planet.
Well, what have they done?
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, I mean, what are they now? I mean, if we look at the big ones, the InfoWars, Red Ice in a different way, but to the same degree. Who else? What are some other ones?
Drudge Report.
Drudge Report.
Would you?
Yeah.
That's pretty big.
Put them in there.
You've got all sorts of like smaller pundits that are like.
And
they still get like massive views, like the YouTube personalities and stuff.
The YouTube personalities, yeah. I mean, there's so many of them who aren't necessarily full like alternative conspiracy, but a bit more mainstream pop culture. Because that's kind of where it's gone anyway. The alt-right and alternative media has kind of merged into this kind of lifestyle brand in a way. Where they're kind of tying in with all these. These kind of much more tempered down cultural pundits who are not talking about geopolitics so much as they are just ranting on social issues. But what has that all become? And most importantly, I mean, these cultural pundits, they're just like the Piers Morgans of the bloody alternative media. So who cares about them?
To be on YouTube, instead of TV.
So exactly. So who cares about them? But if we go back to InfoWars or Red Ice or Drudge or Paul Joseph Watson, all these people, they are putting themselves out there as the bastions of the alternative, as providing truth, of providing real journalism. And what are they now but the exact same thing as KWLA6 from Nightcrawler? It's the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
They've degenerated to the worst standard of media possible in a lot of ways, and for that reason, they're more popular than ever. So what's happened here? What's happened here? The alternative media has degenerated in order to get, ratings, in order to bring in the numbers, and has been absolutely successful in doing that because they are more popular and more mainstream than ever, and it's only getting bigger. I mean, the places like InfoWars, like a household name now. I mean, you see people who a few years ago would have just laughed at Alex Jones, and they kind of talk about him now like, yeah, well, he's a bit crazy, but not that crazy.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Even though he's crazier than ever.
He's crazier than ever. Yeah, exactly. But because him and his ilk are now playing this game, even to an even greater degree, playing the numbers game, whipping everything up into sensationalism, running these ridiculous headlines and things like that. They have been successful. They are reaching a bigger audience than I ever thought imaginable, to be honest.
Yeah, it's surprising, but not at the same time.
Well, not when you think about it.
Yeah. It is. There's so many things going on. Yeah, these. I'm at a loss right now, to be quite honest. Other than this pains me all the time because at one point, I mean, I really felt that there was promise in alternative media to do something really good and different, and push real difficult, challenging information out there in the public realm and get people to start thinking about those sorts of things. But due to the fact that the big outlets that were purporting to do this in the early days are just resorting to these very same underhanded tactics that the mainstream media uses, their message has become tainted along with their tactics.
Yeah, it has. And I wonder if it is a self-destructive thing, because we've talked a lot in the past about the idea of this whole thing. I don't want to say controlled and guided to such a fine degree, because I think it's much more complex than that. But the idea of alternative media narratives, alternative media pundits, and ideas and memes kind of just being pushed into some kind of self-destructive mode, where they pump it up, they make it mainstream, they make it sensationalistic and ridiculous, and in doing so, they completely trivialize the power that they had. We've talked about this, and where it's all going, and whether this is being nudged to basically self-destruct by going over the top. And I wonder whether this is part of it. Because, I mean, if we look at the stories that are going around at the moment about this fake news battle, the whole fake news idea. I mean, what's that about?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Why don't you take a look in the mirror there for a second? And if you're concerned about fake news, stop putting it out.
Well, I can see both sides of it, because what's happening is it's the big media establishment is running fake news a lot of the time. They do put out bullshit story. And when I say fake news, what I mean is that the what, the when, and the where can be true, but the how, the why, and the who can be completely false. And that's how mainstream media often operates. This is how they spin their narratives, and they can completely lie about something. But what's happening now is that these places like Google and Facebook are now having meetings and running committees and think tanks on how to combat fake news, because they say that fake news was one of the things that led to Trump getting elected. And of course, so I think we touched on this a little while ago, how Google were actually massively backing the Democrats and Hillary, and they had a whole strategy in place for how they were going to help get her in. So they were obviously pretty democratic and blue up there in Silicon Valley, but
yeah, they were using narrow AI systems to do it.
Yeah.
Big data, all that stuff.
Yeah, so they are obviously not that pleased about Trump getting in. So this has resulted in all of these meetings and headlines about how these alternative media sites. So again, we've got Drudge Report, I think was in there. Alex Jones, Paul Joseph Watson, a lot of the other big ones. I know that 21st Century Wire was at the top of that list as well, and they are probably one of the more credible alternative media websites out there. I think they're good, actually. So, the mainstream media establishment, which is lying, creating narratives, and using techniques of propaganda, is now, of course, accusing the alt media of doing the same thing in order to take them out. But what's happened? The alt media has walked right into the trap by putting out fake stories. About Julian Assange going missing or being dead or something.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Is this a self-destructive thing?
It's like, oh, Julian Assange is dead. Like, no, wait, no, oopsie. Basically, Paul Joseph Watson wrote a tweet afterwards that equated to whoopsie. More or less, he said that. Not so many words.
But this is it. They're all crying foul, saying, "How dare you, mainstream? You accuse us of being fake when you're the real fakes." And then Alex Jones puts out a video saying, "Hillary's about to start World War III." It's just it's not helping. So,
oh my gosh, we are. Boy, we've made it a long way. It's nutty to see. It's hard to say what sort of strategies can be put into place by people who are still sane out there in order to combat all this propaganda from all media outlets of any description. I've been racking my brain as to what maybe somebody could do about this, and if I come up with a good idea, I'd like to go for it. I just really haven't yet.
In one sense, they say that the alt media and especially the alt right say that what we're doing here is we're creating our own culture, and we're creating a culture to replace the mainstream liberal establishment's culture. And so, in doing so, we are going to be using comedy. We're going to be using artistic license. We are going to be creating our own narratives. We're basically going to be adopting the principles of propaganda to combat the propaganda of the establishment. And so, on paper, you can kind of understand how that reasoning works in terms of rather than just simply trying to pick it apart, rather than just taking the lead and doing your own thing. But at the same time, you're just playing the same game. You're going to end up in the same place. It can only go one way. And I think the only thing that can be done to, combat that is simply to talk about it for what it is and to call it out for what it is, like we're doing here. So.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that. I've been doing a lot of it on Twitter, on these broadcasts with you, and I want to continue to do so because I feel this is important.
Well, it is important
because people are fed up.
Mm.
They're sick of it. People want to hear. I don't want to say we have the truth, but people want to say enough is enough and be like, yeah, I can see through the lies of all this, and I don't feel like paying attention to you anymore. I want something else.
Yeah, I think paying less attention to mainstream media and less attention, especially to television, is important. Because it's so powerful. It is so powerful. But I tell you what's interesting as well is the this. It just got me thinking about again, tying it back to Nightcrawler and this character Lou and him being the psychopath working in a psychopathic industry. Is I think what a lot of what's happening here in terms of the alt-right and the alt media is I think we're probably dealing with a lot of the same types of people. And I'm not going to go out on a limb and call anybody out as being a sociopath, but we're dealing with people who are basically narcissistic and opportunistic and who are in it for the sake of sensationalism, for the sake of journalism. So it's not necessarily about, for us, we're talking about, without wanting to pat ourselves on the back too much, we're talking about some kind of integrity here. We're talking about what is actually true, what is actually fair, what is actually balanced, and not getting caught up in some overly emotional narrative. But I think for a lot of the people involved in, say, these YouTube personalities, I mean, especially like people like Milo Yiannopoulos or Paul Joseph Watson or any of these people, they don't give a shit. They don't care about the cause of truth. They don't care about the cause of righteousness or integrity. They care about sensationalism and getting attention. And those are the people that are leading the charge and setting the tone for the rest of us. So we're back in the same position again.
Yep. Yeah, fingers need to be pointed at those types, and they need to be called out for who they are. So I'm going about doing that. I hope that people start seeing them for what they are soon. I'd like to see them tarred and feathered, to be quite honest. They deserve it. What else I want to say? I guess just in terms of the psychopathic industry, the fact that industry itself kind of has a psychopathic nature to it, or at least certain ones do.
Yeah.
And, news media in Nightcrawler, it shows it so well that like this is a psychopathic industry. And so the psychopath just gets up in there and he succeeds because it's his thing. And people like the Nina character, while they're not psychopaths themselves, they become proto-psychopaths where they take on psychopathic traits due to their engrossment in this. And it's their day-to-day activities. They have to do this. And so they it alters you, and you get to the point for Nina, you get this like dark attraction to the exemplar Lou of this whole process. And he comes along, it's like, man, this guy's the master of this thing I've been involved in all my life, and so I am going to be attracted to him, even though that's a sick, twisted, and perverse attraction. It's going to work on me, and I'm going to have this codependent relationship with him. And again, that's symbolic of how these sorts of industries, these practices, can get the best of anybody who is entrenched in them. So anybody out there like putting out this media that's gone all in, that has committed themselves to just doing the best that they can in like propping up the creation that they make, the media that they make, and if that's the main goal they set in like getting the most attention to their media, then this is the love affair. This is the perverse love affair that they've gotten themselves involved in.
And in a way, you can understand how people get there, because it's like any other form of enterprise or commerce. You get involved in some kind of new business, and you start out for the love of it. You start out for for genuine, authentic reasons, and you're wanting to do the right thing. But then you realize that if you just make a few small compromises, then all of a sudden you're starting to get a lot more success. You're earning more money, you're getting more attention, and it's all really happening. And of course, this is just it can only go one way. You know, the more you get, the more you want, and the more compromises you end up having to make. And I think this is probably what's happened with a lot of people in alternative media, is having started out for the right reasons and being, you know, young and idealistic and wanting to just to spread a genuine message of hope or truth or what have you to the rest of the world, and then realizing slowly and gradually along the way that, hey, if I just kind of pump this up a little bit, I can get a whole bunch more, you know, like views on YouTube. And then, of course, that leads to more and more. And within a few years, they're just, you know, putting out these most ridiculous stories because that's what it's come down to. And that's the name of the game. You know, the people around them will be doing that. You know, that this is the world that they live in. You know, and it's just like the world of ratings on these news stations.
Yeah, it's not about free thought whatsoever. That term isn't actually used in media, or I don't know if is the term like truth has even thrown to the curb at this point. Is that even used by like Alex Jones or anybody like that? The truth movement still exists as in or not yet?
I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it in a long time. So I don't think so. I mean, a lot of narratives are changing now. I mean, there's a whole bunch of words that they don't use anymore that they used to use. So again, I think truth movement and these types of things. Yeah, they're out the window. It's all about the cause, the narrative. So
yeah. Well, thank God they're not using that term for this thing. So at least they're not dragging word truth through the mud along with everything else there. So that's nice. And they at least haven't done that.
Yeah, well, I think they could be too easily called out. You know, I mean, it'd almost be just a little bit too audacious of people like, Alex Jones for them to go and call themselves the truth movement or say that they are about truth, and then, you know, run some story about how, you know, Hillary practiced a satanic ritual on election night, you know, to try and place a fatwa on Trump or some crap like that.
Spirit cooked up a pizza in her oven, and there happened to be child pornography in the toppings. Or John Podesta was there, and he was there looking at a twisted piece of modern art that's evil. And I lost the train of thought, but you know, this is exactly what you'd hear. You know?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's ridiculous out there.
It certainly is.
You know, the self-fulfilling prophecy aspect of this, it endlessly fascinates me, though. You know, because Alex Jones famously plays the Imperial March from Star Wars at the beginning of his broadcast, but he's basically become seduced by the dark side, you know, so to speak. I mean, he exemplifies that going down the wrong path and just going further and further and further until, you know, you just end up trying to create this empire of your own. For him, it's a media empire, right? But he is the emperor, and I guess, I don't know, Paul Joseph Watson is a Darth Vader. Mark Dice is like one of the goofball guys that drives the Star Destroyers that gets choked by Darth Vader. You know, onward and onward.
Oh yeah. That is weird, isn't it? Because I mean, I often, you know, back in the day where I used to watch Alex Jones on a fairly or somewhat regular basis, I used to, you know, tune in to his morning show, and it would be the Imperial March. I'm thinking, okay, this is obviously, is this supposed to be satire? Is this why is he playing it constantly in the background? It's a little bit weird. Okay, so you stand in opposition to the Empire, right? This is what you're against, and you're playing that theme song over and over and over again.
He's opposing the Galactic Empire, which is the elite, the New World Order. That's the implied idea at first.
Yeah, it just doesn't stack up, though. You know, it doesn't quite stack up to me. It seems to me more like some kind of predictive programming or suggestion or normalization, if you will. You know, to get people in line with something a bit more authoritarian, shall we say?
Yeah, and they're totally authoritarian, siding with the police on all matters, and that like this call to more authority. You know, we need to get the authorities in here to, again, bash the heads of these evil protesters. You get a lot of that sort of rhetoric going on in alt media spheres. It's bizarre. This, the people that were warning about this police state are kind of now wanting a police state to come in to end the chaos of all these ruffians out there causing problems on the streets.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, again, like you say 5 years ago, even more so 10 years ago, you would have Alex Jones or whoever else out on the streets at these protest marches looking at police brutality, and they'd be going up to these kids going, "Are you okay? And what happened here? And this is the police state, and this is martial law unfolding before us, and you know the Constitution's going down the drain, and we're going into FEMA camps and all this type of stuff." And then fast forward to a few years later, and he's, as you say, siding with the police and everything and saying, "Look at these goddamn, good for nothing protesters, disrupting
protesters." And the Muslims, basically they're saying, throw all these people in camps. The leftist protesters and the Muslims, we need to get the police to round them up and then lock them away and throw away the key.
Well, why? Because they're disrupting law and order. Can't have that, can we?
Yeah, and their man, Donald J. Trump, ran as the law and order candidate. He used that exact terminology.
Yeah.
Law and order.
Incredible.
Crazy. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if they actually start critiquing him, because they're already making excuses for him. I mean, I've watched a couple of clips on Alex Jones and a few other people, and they've already started, saying how, he had to say this, and he had to flip-flop or backtrack on this because there was no other option, and actually this is really good. It's just like, oh, man, are you serious, Yeah. I mean, I can understand.
I understand a certain level of pragmatism, sure. Yeah,
exactly.
But, getting, these guys like Giuliani in there, and they're, floating Romney, and Gingrich is his buddy. New age of transitions. Gingrich.
I know.
Peter Thiel is getting in there on the transition team, or, having some influence on, I like to call it the Donald Trump age of transition.
Yeah. Gingrich is there and with him, as you say, so, yeah. I mean, of course.
Gingrich and Thiel alone, that's all you need.
That's a recipe for some serious transitions. Yeah. But of course, these people were all slamming him leading up to the election. But this is politicians for you, isn't it? They've got to play the role of the opposition. And
some of them, like Gingrich especially, were for a long time actually championing Trump. And I found that fascinating. Like when Gingrich, during the earlier days of the election, was cheerleading Trump, I was just wondering, what is going on with this? And you just knew that there's more to the story. And I still don't know the full story there, but it aroused suspicion, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, look, they're politicians, and whether or not Trump, was a politician before the election, he's a politician now, and he knows how to be a politician. So, I don't know how much you can really expect from him, but yeah.
Well, whatever. Why don't we draw this episode to a
Yes, we should draw this episode to a close. So, I'm not sure what we're going to do next time. Probably review another film. But this was an interesting discussion. I mean, I guess we didn't end up talking about Nightcrawler all that much, but it was kind of just a lead on from those same topics, because it was really about how alternative media has now degraded itself to the level of KWLA6 and Nightcrawler, and how it seems to be run now, at least on the upper levels, by people like Lou, these psychopathic opportunists who are about getting those sensationalistic extremist stories to fabricate these ridiculous narratives to keep people in fear and push certain political agendas. So it is relevant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you're frustrated with media out there, we're just feel better knowing that you're not alone. We're right there with you. Not everybody has lost their mind. And just remember, media, all these media outlets are putting out narratives. You don't have to buy into them, you know. And that's the main thing. Like, we can sit here and analyze these things. I think that's important to do. At the end of the day, all of us have to like put things back in perspective and go like, wait a minute, I'm not going to let these like ridiculous narratives actually, you know, tear me apart. I'm not going to buy into their nonsense enough for this to let me really, or for let it really bother me. You know, I mean, you can't let it bother you. Otherwise, the terrorists have already won.
Well, this is true, and it's easier said than done sometimes, because these narratives and the people behind them are working on deep psychological principles and archetypes that are designed to get you in a base state of reasoning, you know, into an emotive state of reasoning, where you you start feeling feelings of fear, you know, and again the in-group out-group stuff and fear of the other and all this type of stuff. But again, I think what I would suggest is that, you know, once you start to feel those feelings, just switch off and say, right, no, I will not let myself go there. And remember that there's always another side to the story, no matter what it is, and no matter how strong you feel about something, there's always another side to the story. So I think that's the most important thing to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we hope you'll listen and subscribe to our podcast. Our website is tmpodcast.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn, and Google Play. Many other podcast apps will be on those as well. We have a Twitter account and we have a YouTube account, so be sure to look into those. And if you really want to help us, leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or other things. Definitely iTunes, that helps a lot. Or just share the show with others, and you're doing us a favor. So thank you.
Yeah, we would certainly love to, you know, hear feedback from people. We don't get a lot of it. When we do get it, we do appreciate it. So yeah, that'd be great. But it's been an interesting discussion, Aaron. So until next time.
Yes, we will see you there. Today's episode of Themes and Memes was recorded on the 27th of November, 2016.